I want to just pick up a little bit where Bhajana left off. First let me say first of all that part of why I'll say some of the things I want to say and explain is because this video will go up online and people will be watching who haven't been here. And so I want to be particularly careful to explain a lot of concepts. And also there's some people here who are newer with us, so it'll be a good thing to do tonight. But I'd like to just pick up a little bit with where Bhajana was and comment on a few things she said. That was a rather extraordinary hour that she did, just really showing us how with literally deep breathing and opening up these channels for energy in essence. I mean, breath for us is energy. It is what activates our whole body. She used the phrase life force, which really is prana, which means energy. And it's when that life force is blocked or mostly if it's not flowing, we can use the words if it's imbalanced, but what does that really mean? I mean, if we try and ask ourselves, what does it mean if the life force is imbalanced? And it's going to take me deep into places that we can't totally go tonight. But basically, that's why we talk about these vortices of energy that are in our energetic or astral spine. And if we have energy, just everything is made up of energy, and if that energy is flowing, if you will, this is not really exactly how it happens, but in the quote-unquote wrong direction. And I just said this somewhere, so forgive me those of you who are coming. Maybe nobody here even heard it. I don't remember what class I said it in. Lena might have heard it. But wrong, or good direction, bad direction, right, wrong, really just means anything's in the wrong direction that would lead us away from being in harmony with our true nature, which we know to be divine, and which we're always aiming, we're always looking to try and move back into oneness, to remember who we are and to live in tune with that. So it's not as judgmental as it sounds in the English language, good, bad, right, wrong, except when we are taking that direction, that energy in the wrong direction, when we get sidetracked with everything external to ourselves, when we, even as we'll talk now, in a little bit, I'll say to you, wellness has nothing to do with the physical state of the body. I mean, I'm saying it right now, it's a state of mind. It's much more of an attitude. It's a frame of mind that we need to cultivate, because people can be in a state of total wellness who are, in fact, dying or who have chronic illnesses. So the term wellness, as we want to think of it tonight, has nothing to do with what's going on physically. I'll tell you one story, but then I want to come back to where I was just going with good, bad, right, wrong. So if I forget, somebody help me remember. But, and some of you have heard me talk about this, I was practicing medicine in a very vibrant way as the AIDS epidemic hit. I mean, it was a phenomenal moment in time. I was actually in my last year of training when AIDS was discovered. And, we would draw blood from everybody in our bare hands, and we would put NG tubes down. We were doing everything. I mean, we were careful, but we had no idea about things that were that contagious and ultimately, in those days, deadly. I mean, again, this was a long time ago. If you developed HIV, you were gone. There was just nothing to do about it. It was just the death sentence. So I also happened to, as most of you know, develop this subspecialty in the field of chemical dependency. So I worked with a lot of addicts and alcoholics and a lot of people who had been putting needles into their arms for a long time. And they, in fact, had AIDS. And they were all going to die. And they knew they were going to die. And it happened pretty quickly. I mean, there was no drugs at all to slow it down. And so many people, because word spreads in the addiction community. You know, addicts, if any addict in the community knows anything, they all do. Where they can get their drugs, who will prescribe the most, who can help them when they're in trouble. It's actually a very tight-knit community usually. So I developed a reputation at that time for being somebody who could, as they told each other, this was their phrase, help them die well. And what did that mean? They were dying. I used to go and lay on the floor next to their hospital bed. I did this more nights than I can tell you, and just be with them and be helping them breathe or doing visualizations or talking to them, listening to them a lot about what God was for them. What did they think was going to happen when they died? What did they want to happen? You know, could they forgive themselves? Was a big thing. Could they realize they were not this body? They were not simply a drug addict. And all of the things that they had done, some of which were pretty horrible. I mean, there you are meeting people who were telling you in strict confidence that they had killed people. You know, they had stolen all of their grandmother's jewels, literally to the tune of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and sold them for, you know, a little bit of heroin. I mean, it's really stuff that could give you pause. If it was your life, you'd go, you know, what's it going to look like? Where am I going? And particularly for people who believed in a heaven and hell. So to be able to help those people realize that they were still this perfect being in the midst of everything, it was an extraordinary gift to me. I'll just say that. I mean, a lot of them benefited. But you see, why I'm telling you right now is because here were people who were dying, but who came and wanted to spend those last bits of time with me. It was impersonal in a way, except that I could really help them see that they were not the body, they were not this disease of addiction, they were not simply the person who had committed the murder or been beating people up or lying or stealing, that really at the core of it, they were perfect, just as they were. So that was helping them move to a place of wellness, you see? And that, again, has nothing to do with what's going on with the body. But that's very challenging for most of us. Now, before I move on, let me go back to tell you, good, bad, right, wrong. Thank you all for reminding me. You're all looking at me with these blank faces. I thought, boy, I'm in trouble now. I was counting on you. So what good means, or a right direction for controlling, managing this life force, which is what Bhajana was showing us. Look at what happens when you breathe consciously. In a way, that's all she was doing. She was helping us stretch out our body feeling where is our center. But mostly what she was doing, always what she was doing, was around breath. So we could see what we could do just by taking 3 deep breaths. It changes your mind. It changes your awareness. It changes your consciousness. We would say that's a good thing to do. That's taking us in the right direction because it's bringing us back in tune with the essence of who we are. Instead of having us be out here somewhere, outside of ourselves, wherever that is, feeling anxious, feeling nervous, feeling angry, feeling frustrated, even feeling tired when you think of it. I remember one time, there was a man who lived in our community for a very long time. He's now up at another one of our communities in Laurelwood. His name is Dunbar. He's a really great soul. He's guileless. I think he's about as egoless as almost anybody I know. And he just walks around and says what's on his mind, and it would never dawn on him to be concerned about doing that because it's coming from such a pure place in him. Anyway, suffice it to say, he's charming and wise. And I remember one day he looked at me after we had done days of really hard work, serving. I don't remember what it was. It was probably around Christmas. That's a time where there's a lot of days where we get to really put out a lot of energy. And he looked at me one day, he said to me, "Don't even think it, Shanti." I hadn't said a word, nothing. He said, "You are pure energy. Can energy be tired? How could energy be tired? You are not tired. You will never be tired again." He told me, just like Sri Yukteswar told Master. The Master did this 3 days of serving really hard. I've told some of you this story. And just when he felt that he and Sri Yukteswar were going to finally get to go to sleep, after serving these huge meals in India, they feed literally thousands of people at a time. They lay down these banana leaves, and they throw 3 or 4 different dishes on them. You sit on the floor, you eat, you get up and leave. Next shift comes in. I mean, it's thousands for a great master like Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda. I'm sure they did it many times. And it goes on and on and on. And it's darshan. It's a gift to be in front of the teacher. So everybody wants to come. Master was just getting ready to lay down. Sri Yukteswar sits right up, and he says, "More guests are coming." And Master Yogananda said to him, "How can more people be coming? Everybody's gone, we're done." Sri Yukteswar said, "No, in an hour or 2, other guests are going to be here." Then he says to Yogananda very sweetly, "You go ahead, you go back to sleep. I'll serve them." As if he would go back to sleep and let his guru serve him. So they got up, they made a whole meal again, and of course the guests came. Sri Yukteswar was right. But then he looked at Master and he said to him, which was such an extraordinary gift when you think of it, "You will never again in your life be afraid of hard work or fatigue. You've passed that test, you've passed through it. Nothing will ever look hard, and you'll never be tired." And when you think of it, that of course was to a master. But if we decided that, when we decided, because I think many of us in this room do, we see that it works. If we just say, I'm not going to get tired. I'm not going to get tired. My friend Ramani came over to visit me for a little visit. I was at home working today. She's been wanting to talk to me, so I said to her, "Come on over for an hour." And she came over, and she stood at the door. She said, "I'm starting to get something, and I'm sick." And I said to her, "Oh, get in here." She said, "Well, I'm not going to hug you." I said, "Of course you're going to hug me." And then I just looked at her. I said, "Ramani, I'm not getting sick. I mean, I'm just not getting sick." And she looked at me. She knew it was true. When we know that to be true, that's an incredible antidote to whatever it is that's trying to get in. Now, I'm saying these to you. These are not just random stories. They're only random in the sense that they're popping into my mind now. But they're not random because they really are speaking about wellness. They're not speaking about being silly and saying, "I know I can do this, I know I can do this," or "I wish I could do this." Or they're not being in denial, which I see a lot of when people first get difficult medical diagnoses. I see it a lot with cancer. People come in to me and they say, "Oh no, I know I can cure myself of this cancer." And the truth is very few people cure themselves of cancer. So that's not the same kind of when you know without a doubt. I just said to her, "No way. There is no room in my life right now for me to be sick. I am not getting that virus." And that was it. I just didn't think about it. And I'm telling you, but I'm not getting the virus. This is a way of really taking that life force and of planting it where we need it to be. And it's one, I made a copy, but I didn't make copies for all of you. I could, and we will, but Jyotish wrote many years ago a book called 30-Day Essentials for Wellness. And it's number 1 through 30. I thought we might talk about a few of them tonight. If we get there, we'll see. But the very first one, number 1, which surprised me, is mind over matter. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that it's in here because it's true. But I know Jyotish, and I'm sure he was very thoughtful about the order that this book unfolded in. So it's one thing a day for a month. Ananda has a lot of those 30-day things, and you study them and you restudy them. But he says, the mind is the fountainhead for both wellness and disease. And it just goes on talking about our subconscious and emotional selves and how that steers us and how important it is to get conscious. So in essence, we could say, and we do say, and Swami Kriyananda said, that wellness is the opposite of living unconsciously. And it's exactly right, because as soon as we get really conscious about what we're doing, as soon as we get our life force heading in the direction that it needs to be heading, as soon as we are aware moment by moment of the decisions we're making, of choices we're making, then we're living consciously and we're well. Now, is that easy? Of course it's not easy. You know, most of us live unconsciously most of the time. Everybody's had that experience where you get somewhere, you're driving, you get somewhere, and all of a sudden you realize, God, I have no memory of driving here. We call that being unconscious, but everybody's had it happen. I mean, I could give a lot of examples. You know, you meet somebody and you're engaged, and then you turn around and you're thinking, what was their name? You know, you can't remember. They just told you their name 2 minutes ago. But we're not quite present in those ways. We're not quite paying attention in the ways that we need to. So when I say, oh, if we just get our energy focused, if we could just concentrate, if we could just pay better attention, if we could, it just seems like simple. And it is, but it's not easy. And here's another reason why it's not easy. Remember, these are all pertaining to this notion of wellness. And that is because we are both hooked on being the way we are, most of us, actually like being the way we are. And although we think that we want to change, and we think we want to get to this goal that we're talking about, as soon as we're asked to make the least little change in our habits, in our way of thinking, in our way of approaching life, dealing with people, just watch how much resistance comes up. It's absolutely extraordinary. We were just talking before class, Ramurti and Sita and I, about one of the younger people in our community, and we're both sitting here saying, one of the things about her that is such a joy to be around is she's undefended. She wants to learn, she wants to grow, so whatever she does, she's looking for feedback, and she means it. And it's just such a pleasure to just let energy flow like that. I don't think I could say that about myself in the same way. It's like a pureness in her, in this aspect of learning these teachings and getting to be living more in tune with them. She wants that kind of feedback. But it's really hard. There's there's a book, I've mentioned it many times over the years. I used to, in my past life, when I used to give a lot of talks, they were kind of self-motivational talks. They weren't centered in spirit or in God, which of course most of them are now. But they were really self-motivational. There was a book that I read that I still love. Before every single talk I ever gave, I would open it up and read a few lines. And it was about change. And right now the title of that book is eluding me. It's not called The Power of Change, but it's a book by a man whose name is Dennis Wholey, with a W, Wholey. He used to be on one of these nighttime talk shows, but he was an alcoholic, and he eventually had to leave his work. But when he got into recovery, he started going around the country talking to other alcoholics about how they changed their life. Anyway, he wound up writing this book about change that's fabulous. But there's a line in there that says, change is not made without inconvenience, even from worse to better. So no matter what's being asked of us, when we have to get out of these patterns that we have of how we're going to behave, it's what Swami Kriyananda used to call self-definitions, the way we see ourselves, the way we hold on to our likes and dislikes, never mind the gross thing that we hold ourselves as male, female, I'm a doctor, I live in this place, this is the way I like to dress. All my likes and dislikes, he called them self-definitions. But we love those things more than we think we do. So making this transition from being unwell, unconscious, sick in a way, though not just the physical part of it, to wellness, it's not easy for us. We're more attached than we think we are to being the way we're being. Now we actually have, as I just mentioned in a Sunday service a couple of weeks ago, we have evidence now, scientific evidence, that the brain is wired to hold on to that. So not only is there all of our karma coming with us and all this stuff that wants to keep us right where we are, behaving the ways we've always behaved, but our brain itself is actually making chemicals and developing anatomically in ways that keep us in bad habit. So we really have to make commitments to wanting to change. Now, the good news about that is, lest I leave you depressed about it, is that what they found out in all ways is that meditating, they took people and they had them start a meditation practice. They had never meditated before. 20 minutes, twice a day for 8 weeks. And I just read another study today that said most people really didn't meditate 40 minutes a day. The woman who was writing the article said, most of my people meditated on average 12 and a half minutes a day. But at the end of 8 weeks, not only did they fill out all these forms saying how much better they felt, and many, many diseases started to change. I mean, many things that you wouldn't think of. You might think depression, anxiety, back pain. I mean, you could imagine some of those things changing. But fibromyalgia, inflammatory bowel diseases, I mean, serious respiratory illnesses started to change in 8 weeks, which is really it's a remarkable data. I mean, just remarkable. So not only did people report feeling more calm, more at ease, more uplifted, and nobody spoke to them about wellness, they didn't know what they were supposed to do. There was no talking around it, really. I mean, they're in a program, but 20 minutes twice a day for 8 weeks, lives change. It's a remarkable bit of data. And as I've said before when I've spoken about it, I can't think of one area of medicine where we have such great data. You know, we're not that good. We're good about certain things. If you have an appendicitis, you know, I'm going to suggest you see a surgeon, and there's many things that we do well. But we don't have that kind of effect on high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes. We wish we had data like this, but we don't. So the good news is that as you meditate, you are, and now we have ways of imaging it, and we can measure neurotransmitters and cortisol levels in our body, things that matter. But you're making dramatic changes within 8 weeks. So this practice of meditation is an extraordinary way to move our lives on, to change everything about not just our brain, but I mean our immune system and really subtle systems in the body. Okay, so all that I was starting to say by way of saying, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of commitment to want to be well. And sometimes I think just knowing that, you know, I was watching everybody when we were doing even the super conscious living exercises. When I used to teach them, I don't teach them all that much anymore because we usually teach them in beginning meditation. But when I used to teach it a lot, I used to say to people, you're going to feel like you look so stupid doing these. I mean, who stands up? Where in the world do you get up and say, I am awake and ready? But it's essential that you say those words, not just that you go along with it, but because it's part of the courage, the commitment, the energy, the magnetism, all of that, which gets that life force flowing in the right direction. So if anybody's going to do them, you really want to get up first thing in the morning and say it loudly and with great energy, even if you're in a place where you can't say it loudly. You go, I am awake and ready, and mean it, even if you can only repeat it to yourself. But honestly, saying the words make a difference. It really matters. Words are energy, vibration. I mean, we talked about that for many of you in Raja last week, but it's the truth. So now, what are some of the other tools that we have to get us to this place of wellness? These are a lot of what Jyotish goes over in the book, but not exactly. The book's a little different. He talks about, his first thing was mind over matter. Day number 2 was take responsibility for yourself, which is very important that we say, and I think Bhajana said this, one of the super conscious living exercises when she was saying, take charge of your body. Realize that you can be responsible for your body. Don't give that responsibility away. The more we say, I'm going to take care of this body, this mind, this soul, I'm going to do what's right, just saying that. These are things most people do not walk around saying to themselves, ever. But to say it with that kind of an affirmation, I'm not going to read you all of this, but I'm just reading you the first few. I want to turn around and go in a different direction. But the third thing that he says here, I'll tell you the third and fourth because they're very important, is how can we make the conscious choice to see, we're calling it illness, but we could call it any difficult life circumstance, whatever it is. So when we offered this chronic pain workshop some weeks ago, Lahari and I up at the village, it wasn't just people with physical pain who came. People who were having emotional or spiritual crises came. Chronic pain, when you're in pain in any way. To see illness, we'll just lump it like that, as an opportunity. Master always said there's no such thing as an obstacle, there's only opportunities. That if we could say whatever is happening in our life right now, whatever it is, no matter how challenging it is, that it is always and inevitably, again, assuming you want to be well, an opportunity for spiritual growth. That's what's going, everything. And it's one thing if you think about that, if you're having a little fight with your partner or you sprain your ankle. I mean, these are big things. You sprain your ankle, it's hard to get around, but still, as the world turns, it's not major. But Master didn't say sometimes it's not an obstacle, it's an opportunity. He said everything, there's nothing in life that's an obstacle. It's always an opportunity. So that means if you're diagnosed with cancer, or maybe even worse, if your child's diagnosed with cancer, or if your house burns down, or if it disappears in a hurricane. I mean, these things that people go through that are horrible. Now, we're not saying that we don't have a reaction to it, that we don't feel it. Of course we feel it. We're human beings. We're living with the human condition here. But as soon as we can, to ask ourselves, okay, what can I do with this that's going to help me expand, grow, move through it in a good way? You know, there's this simple little story that Swamiji tells about, well, there's a couple of them. They just collided in my mind. But one that's even more dramatic than what I was going to say is when Ananda was first starting, we only had what's now called the meditation retreat. And at one point, the temple burned. It's in the woods. And at one point, the temple burned down. There was a fire up there. And Swamiji was in the little town of Nevada City, I think that day or the next day. And he was humming and singing. And somebody in a store said to him, how could you be humming and singing? I heard everything just burned down. And Swamiji said, whether I'm miserable about it or whether I'm in a good mood today, it burned down and we'll rebuild. Whatever it was, I might be bringing some stories together, but it's a true story. I mean, whatever happened, whatever burned, whatever collapsed, it's just sort of those things happen, and how we approach them and how we deal with them matters more than anything in our lives can matter. It turns this energy around. It redirects life force. It allows us to feel strong and centered and whole and complete, all those things that are about a state of wellness. Now you can begin to see what a challenge it is. I mean, I think about these people who just went through this fire, and I think to myself, many of them many of them did not have one article of clothing, not a toothbrush, not a driver's license, not a computer, not a phone, nothing. They had zero. They literally ran out of their homes. And you just imagine those people who are really working hard to stay positive and energetic. So, and yet, it's no less true there than it is if something simple happens. It's just simply the truth. How are you going to look at it? How are you going to take it? It matters a lot. And Joe Tish's fourth point that is so meaningful, again, remember, he's talking about being in a state of wellness. And he says, never let your illness define you. Another very, very challenging lesson, but still the truth. Again, if we're talking about wanting to be well, not to let an illness define you. You are not your cancer. You are not your addiction. You are not that man who stole your grandmother's jewels. That's not who you are. You are a perfectly healthy, intact, alive, vibrant, heading back to your home in God soul, no matter what's going on, anytime, any place, anywhere. These are the kind of things we want to hold on to. So what are some of the ways that we can start thinking about it? I mean, attitudes, I'll call them, or just little tidbits to walk away with, to think about. Well, the first is right-mindedness, and that's what we've been talking about. How am I going to hold this in my mind? You know, I just want to parenthetically say, because I've said these things so many times, I mean to myself and out loud, but you know, most people never think about these things. These are concepts that are not out in the world. I mean, people feel entitled to be angry. They feel I just had this really interesting experience. There's a retreat in the hills of Santa Cruz Mountains, and their food is fabulous. You go there to do seclusion, but their food is fabulous. So when I was there last time, it's called Vajrapani. It's a Buddhist retreat. I bought their cookbook, and I've been making some soups out of it, and people love it. And we have company coming, I mean, the community does, from Portland this weekend. So I said, I'll make them one of these soups, but I can't find the cookbook. I must have loaned it to somebody, and it's gone. So Sunday, I get online, and I order the cookbook, and Amazon says to me, it'll be here Monday by 5 p.m. So I said, that's fine. I was trying to figure out when I'll shop in the midst of this week to have the soup ready by Friday. So the cookbook doesn't come Monday. And so I look, you know, of course you can track everything in the whole world, and now it says, oops, it's going to be there Tuesday by 8 p.m. So I'm waiting last night for the cookbook. It doesn't come. So this morning I get on and I typed Amazon a letter, and I said, what's with you guys? I know cookbook doesn't sound important, but I have all these people. I'm cooking for 25 people. I need the cookbook. And so they write me back a letter, and it's clearly a personal letter. You know, we're really sorry. We could imagine how important a book would be. I mean, somebody taught them to say all the right things. We'll give you either a month of Prime free, or we'll give you $10, a $10 gift certificate, you know? And I wrote them back and I said, you know, here's the truth. I was upset about the cookbook because I'm making dinner for friends. I said, I don't want anything from you. You don't owe me anything. They told me their carriers just do this sometimes. I realized it wasn't them. You know, so the guy writes me back and he says, my God, this is the nicest thing I've heard in months, he said. You're actually saying you don't want our $10. It was so funny. You know, but I realized that this is not about me. I'm not saying it because I did something so great, quite frankly. $10 is not really going to have a huge impact on my life, so I wasn't giving up a lot either. But I just realized I didn't feel like they owed me anything. And I wanted to bring some light into that person's life, which it happened that way. They were so happy about it. But very few people do that. Very few. People are always saying, they owe you, you ought to write them a letter. And I'm thinking, you know, who wants to live that way? But in the world, most people do, and they'll help us feel justified in doing it. Just like when Sri Yukteswar said, you go ahead and sleep, honey. I'll go make the meal. You know, you do not want to let your guru do that. You know, you really want to be up and making the meal with him for any one of 1,000 reasons. But so I'm saying it out loud to say to you, when we talk about right-mindedness, think about it, absorb it, let it be with you. So you ask yourself at times, what is the right way to hold my mind right now? Because that's the truth, that $10 isn't going to change my life. But it feels really good to get a $10 gift certificate. There's something wonderful about it. It doesn't matter what it is or if you really need it, it just feels great. You're getting something for nothing. But it wasn't dharmic. It wasn't the right thing to do. Holding a positive attitude, very hard. You just watch people, and Bhajana was showing us that with the breathing. You're feeling down, you're not smiling a lot. We start caving in on ourselves. We are unwell when we're doing that. But we have to say to ourselves, wait a minute, what happens when I sit up straight, when I bring my shoulders back, open my heart, look people in the eye, speak with enthusiasm, be positive. People are drawn to you, things happen that are just wonderful. Again, I don't know where I told this story recently, but some years ago, I was getting on a plane, and I had a pizza that I was eating, and I couldn't finish it. So I took it over, those garbage cans in the airport. They're not big enough to get a pizza box in. So I set it on top. Then I went to check in, and the ticket agent, he was a nice guy. I said to him, you know what? Wait a minute, just like that. I run back, I get the pizza, and I said, here, do you want this pizza? And he starts making fun of me for the whole waiting room to hear. Look at this lady's giving me her garbage. She took it right out of the garbage. I said, no, it wasn't in the garbage. Then I realized he was joking with me, and he wouldn't take the pizza. I threw it out, but he was very sweet, and I meant it in a nice way. I get on the plane, and before we take off, I hear my name over the loudspeaker in the plane, and the guy takes me and upgrades me to first class. It was just like that, like just positivism, just uplifted energy. It wasn't my intention. I was actually, part of my Jewish heritage, I was having trouble wasting the food, if the truth be told. But anyway, I did not want to throw that pizza away. But it's just interesting what happens to us in the world. Swami Kriyananda tells beautiful stories of traveling around, people giving him free rooms, free meals, Why do they do that? Because without them even having a conscious thought, if you walk around in these states, it just uplifts people. They react to you differently. They feel better. It's probably the most important piece of it. They actually feel better. We change lives when we do that, and we change ourselves, and we get our life force. As silly as these stories are that I'm telling you about Amazon and the pizza, it gets everything moving in a right direction. Never mind getting you into first class. Forgiveness, now remember again, these are attitudes, these are states of mind that we're talking about. What does it mean to be forgiving? Again, and I don't want to sound too negative if I keep saying this, but these are concepts that are not thought of. When I was, I was raised in a family that was not easy. Let me just leave it there. My mother particularly, which I realized pretty early on in my life, she was mean. My mother was very mean, but I realized she was just afraid. And I still didn't know what to do with that as a little girl, but over the years, I just worked really hard on forgiving her. And somewhere in my 30s, I had a moment where I just knew I had forgiven her. And she and I developed a very beautiful relationship, actually. So the story had a really happy ending. But I can tell you, almost to this day, if it wasn't that long ago, people say to me, why would you forgive her? She was horrible to you. Why don't, speak to me like it would be better for me to stay angry with her. The discussion doesn't come up, and it's probably been actually a number of years since it has. But when it used to come up, people would rather I stay angry with her. I kept thinking to myself, why would people say that? But it was not uncommon. It's very interesting. People like to hold on to at times, or they're upset. And I wish I could tell you how many times when I meet with people here, that the subject at hand is, what would it take for you to forgive whatever just happened? Let's just say you're right. Let's just say you're right. It's like a very famous psychotherapist from Big Sur from the days when everybody used to go down to Esalen had a saying that he used to say at these group meetings. Would you rather be right or would you rather grow? Would you rather be right or would you rather get somewhere? It's such a beautiful thing to forgive people, to open your heart, no matter what they've said or done. Really, we are who we are. Whatever they say about us or they do to us, it's not changing anything. It's either the truth or it's not. But it doesn't change us. We need to decide to change. So how much can people really hurt us? Why not help ourselves be well by opening our heart and forgiving people when we can? It's just an interesting thing, again, to think about and to move through the world with that level of consciousness, because, of course, people are going to hurt us. Master had made a statement one time, which for years I didn't give a talk without saying it, where he said, a room may be in darkness for thousands of years, but the instant you turn on a light, the darkness disappears. And in that talk, he went on to really say, there's no other way to get rid of darkness. And we can call darkness whatever we want. We can call it an illness. We can call it a difficult relationship. We can call it somebody who's just treated us badly. We can call it anything. You can scream at it. You can argue with it. You can try and analyze it. You can do anything you want. It's not going to go away until you turn a light on. The instant you turn on a light. So you think about what are the ways that you can bring light into your world. And it's all the things we're talking about. Compassion, forgiveness, positivism, right-mindedness. These are all lights that we just walk around turning on. And then we live in the light instead of living in darkness. Let me just stop for a minute. Does anybody have any comments or questions? I had some interesting things that I read years and years ago. There's a psychologist. Her name's Joan Borisenko. Maybe many of you have heard of her. She was at Harvard for years, and she actually was one of the early people working in this mind-body stuff, because we're saying if we can change our mind, that it can have an enormous effect on our state of well-being. She used to do these very interesting studies. She would, for instance, give people syrup of ipecac. It's something that's made to induce vomiting. So if somebody's accidentally taken something that's a poison, or people would take an overdose of pills, you often want to get them to throw it up for obvious reasons. And they would do that with people for a while. And then they would give them something that they said was syrup of ipecac, but was not. And people would just immediately start throwing up. Or other interesting studies, like taking people who have multiple personality disorders and see that some of those people, in one personality, they have full-blown diabetes and they're on insulin. But in another personality, they don't have diabetes. And if you give them insulin, they'll go into insulin shock. These kinds of studies that just tell us that, this may be why Jyotish put mind over matter first, that where our mind is so incredibly important, because these are one body. And, we can trick them in any number of ways, but we can also trick them in positive ways to think well, to be well. Ultimately, and I'll end with this if we don't have questions. I don't really need to keep talking, although I could. Here's the thing that we're talking about, though. We're not simply talking about the state of our body or the state of our mind. This is why this notion of life force and really getting this life force or this prana to be centered within us and to be drawing it up all the time to the point between the eyebrows, drawing it from what we would call lower chakras to the higher chakras. Again, just getting energy magnetized in the right direction. because ultimately, the ultimate state of wellness is that place of remembering. In fact, in some place, Swamiji defines wellness. He uses the Sanskrit word of smriti, which means a deep memory within us of the true nature of our soul. So when we remember who we are, when we realize that we are beautiful, soulful beings that cannot possibly have anything wrong or out of tune or out of line because we're a manifestation of pure divine energy. That no matter what's going on with the body, no matter what happens with this body this time, whether it's fat, whether it's thin, whether it's perfectly well, whether it's injured, whether it's in pain, whatever it is, that the soul that's in that body is perfect. It's absolutely perfect. It's on a journey. It's going through all of these experiences only to find its way back to that state of oneness with the divine. That's why Master says there's no such thing as an obstacle, because every single thing that happens to us, if we hold it in right attitude, right-mindedness, with positivism, if we're compassionate, if we're joyful, if we're all those things that we've been talking about, then we begin to feel our soul nature rather than our egoic, physical, material world nature. Just a question of energy vibrating at different frequencies. But it makes all the difference in the world. There was a line that I read last week when I was getting ready to give my Sunday service that it never came up in Sunday service, but Swamiji was talking about devotion and about pure devotion, the meaning of devotion actually being that which takes us towards that place where we are living in the heart of God, where there's no separation. These are very hard words to get, and I know it. They're hard concepts. They're much more of an experience and of a knowing. But it's beautiful anyway, so I'll just say it for whatever way it can lay down on us and ring true at any time. Do you know? I mean, I understand it's impossible to really get it, but with our minds, we can't do that. But he talked about devotion as being that state where we're living in the heart of the divine. And it's such a beautiful notion because from that place, if you're anywhere near other people who are making that same effort or who have in fact attained that, you really know that we are in fact one with everything. But again, it's an experience that we have to have. But he said at the end of that, he said, and if you're not living there, he said, then you're living in a state of egoic stagnation. And it just rang so true. It's sort of like we know there's something in between. We know the spiritual path is directional. We know we should take it very easy on ourselves in the sense of not going to beat ourselves up because we have, many human qualities, most of us, some which are not, we would actually rather not have, but in fact we do. We don't want to be too hard on ourselves. It's not the way to go. But the truth is, if we're not at least making spiritual progress, if we're not at least thinking about these things about wellness, moving in that direction, then we're in this state of egoic stagnation. I just thought it was so wonderful. So every little, Swamiji has a song called The Hill That Was Tara. And I love this song. I play it almost every day because the end of the song says, it's about a guy and he's thinking about different things that people go through. And, it feels like a little bit of a mundane song to begin with, except it's beautiful. But then he said, I knew in a moment the deeds that men do never die. Each victory is true. So that's the first part of it. Meaning, every success that we have is meaningful. It doesn't go anywhere. Our deeds stay with us. Deeds that men do never die. Each victory is true. So every success we have matters. And then he says, and I love this because it's so hopeful, every effort we spend gives more life in the end till our gladness enjoys ever new. And it's just so encouraging and hopeful. It just says, just keep pointing ourselves in the right direction. Just keep trying to change our mind, to see what's good, to see what's whole, to remember that we're souls, that we're not this body, to do things that we can do to remind ourselves. Put up little signs wherever you are. Literally, I mean, put up little signs. Who can we forgive today? How can we be positive? Are we going to remember? You know, when Bhajana was talking about smiling, Master really said that. He said, if you don't smile a lot, stand in front of a mirror and lift the edges of your mouth up. And we all giggled. Why would we do that? How are we going to remember to raise our energy? Smiling matters. Standing up straight matters. Opening your heart matters. Doing good deeds for people matter. Being dharmic. Not taking what isn't yours. That's why I couldn't take that $10 today. You know, really. Such a silly little thing, but it would not have been good for me to take that. I didn't even think it all through. It wasn't like that. I just felt like it's not mine. It just came to me. But every effort we spend gives more life in the end till our gladness enjoys ever new. We just keep taking these baby steps. We do the best we can do. We keep going till we no longer get tired. We're no longer afraid of hard work. We look at our friends. We see God in them. That's what we see looking back at us. Then we're well. And all these stories that we hear of people who died cancer, so many stories at Ananda, people who died beautifully, inviting their friends in, having these profound moments with them at the end. No fear. So there the body goes, many of them at a very young age, but there the soul is, in a beautiful place, really, headed back to its true nature. So I'm going to stop there. Does anybody want to say anything? Make a comment? Tell a story?
You're speaking right to me tonight because, you know, I came, you could say I came to manic vacation. This is my girlfriend.
Wow.
It's gotten much, much, much better over the last decades. And especially since I got here, and what I noticed was, so this morning, the first thing I found when I opened up my emails, first thing this morning, was rage at me.
Oh.
And then I called my boss, and there was more rage yelling at me on the phone. And I got really mad. How dare he? Doesn't he know who I am? And I got really mad. And normally, in the past, I would have called everybody I could to get on my team.
Right.
Look what this guy did to me. How dare he? Yes, how dare he? And all that. This morning, I was talking to her, how dare he? And as I'm telling the story, how dare he do this to me? Doesn't he know who I am? The whole time I'm talking about it, I could just feel myself going, really? This is silly. And I just knew it was old habits.
Yeah.
that were making this happen, and I can feel it happening. I knew that's not where I wanted to go, but I could also feel that I was just going there. That's where the tires are rutted in the road, and I felt like I was stuck in that rut. I couldn't get out of that rut, but it was much quicker. It was in a very short period of time, and I was able to laugh it off. And in fact, he and I hugged a little bit later when we first saw each other. So
Wow.
yeah, it was.
You know, I'm not saying this lightly or facetiously. That's a beautiful story, David. It really is. You know, I just taught a class on Saturday. We did a Raja Yoga class on the yamas and niyamas. And I'm sorry that I can't, they're all so similar in some way, but there is one of the niyamas, and I don't remember what, that it's exactly about that and the example that I gave. And you know, the yamas and niyamas are the sort of don'ts and do's in life that we get to as we evolve spiritually. I mean, I'm not going to start talking about them now, but they're right at the essence of everything we do and everything we need to learn. I think it's one of the more, I probably say this about a lot of things, but it feels like one of the more meaningful talks to give, lessons to learn. But one of those niyamas is exactly about what it means to bring negativity out into the world. And the example that I said is how easy it is, and I'm in part saying this so that it's all being recorded because it's so much like your story, to how much we can love telling the negative story and getting people on our side, just like you said. And when I was preparing that class for Saturday, I said to myself, you do this a lot. You love to tell a negative story if it has a great ending. I'll come back and I'll go, wow, then we went, and then we got a flat tire, and then this happened, and then the person didn't let us in. And sometimes I repeat a story like that 6 times. And I said to myself, never do that again. Never. And it's exactly what you say. It's like you want people to feel something for you or get with you. What's the point? And it's just so great. I mean, I love hearing how quickly you noticed that's what you were doing. And it's a habit. But these habit patterns that we have are, and you just said it like the tire rut, or if you've ever tried to ski, cross-country skiing particularly, and trying to stay out of those ruts that those darn little, I forget what they're called now, snowmobiles make. It's impossible. You feel like you're going to be in that rut forever. But we have to get out of them. And that's another way that it's trained in our brain, right in the amygdala, literally to stay there. So it's huge what you did. I mean, that you noticed it, that you got out of it. And if it takes 15 minutes or an hour now or 3 hours, and you might never have given it up not that long ago, I mean, what a huge difference that is. Huge. So good for you, really good for you. That is the definition of wellness, really. And Asha tells this, not tells, but she told it once, and it just stuck in my mind, about a woman up at the village who had a lot of children, and she listed all of the yamas and niyamas on the refrigerator. And every time the kids got into trouble with anything, they were fighting with each other, they came home, so-and-so beat me up, or they didn't like what a teacher did, it didn't matter what it was, kids. She would take them right to the refrigerator and say, let's see which of these yamas, the things we're not supposed to do, or the niyamas, the things we should do, almost compared to the 10 Commandments, because there's 5 yamas and 5 niyamas, but they're not the 10 Commandments, but they're sort of spiritually like that. And the mother would have the kids look at the refrigerator and ask them, where do you think you're out of line here? Which yama or niyama are you not living by? I mean, what a great way to grow up, really learning your life like that, because then the kids could always go, oh, I see. I'm creating all this negativity. And again, I wish I could remember, but I can't. Is it coming up which niyama it would be to either of? No. Yeah, I just can't even think of them right now. But whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But it's important, because we cannot advance spiritually until we start getting in tune with all of those do's and don'ts on the spiritual path. But we all go through those stages, and you're just winning, which is wonderful. And yeah, that's what this path does. That's what all of these talks, you keep coming back here, you'll hear these same things, these same stories. You hear it over and over, but you're always in a little bit of a different place. You hear it differently. In a moment, you go, now I get it. And it changes you. It's just in that moment. It's the absolute beauty of truth. We just absorb as much as we can absorb. And really, I mean, I'm not pushing it or stretching it. When we talk about wellness, it is pure truth. It's pure love. It's pure joy. It's the absolute true nature of all of those spiritual qualities. So, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much.